some movies. We're going to do a little Polanski and talk a little bit about Rosemary's Baby. Now, okay, and I'll just say is I'm a film guy, and I've watched all the ones I'm going to talk about. I've watched them, but it's been a couple decade or two, and I saw them once or twice, so I can't recall all the detail. But and again, being a psychiatrist, just the psychological horror of birthing.
The devil.
Yeah, can be quite unnerving, and I think she kind of goes a little batty too because of all this satanic stuff, right?
Well, yeah, because her husband and everyone else is it's conspiring against her.
And making her feel that she is losing her mind.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, Roman Polanski is just an amazing filmmaker. Had some really famous and classic movies, so that's definitely up there.
And this is the movie that broke up Frank Sinatra and Mia Farrow.
Ah,
Because Frank said, if you do this movie, we're done.
ooh, yeah. I didn't know that.
And it's kind of bizarre to think that there's a woman who was with Frank Sinatra and Woody Allen, the same woman.
Yeah, because Woody is not as
Dapper.
debonair.
Two very different
Polar extremes. Yeah, yeah. Woody has his neuroticism that's could be, yeah, I mean, could be endearing. I don't know. Now the Tenant. Now this one I again only watched once or twice, but you know, I love psychological thrillers, and what Polanski does in this, and there's a few other movies that have been able to do this, but I just love when you can tell a story that is fairly limited. I mean, there are some scenes outside the apartment when you're basically filming in very close quarters, and basically and it keeps it intriguing, and over time, basically, the apartment fractures symbolically to his state of his mental state.
Yeah, and in fact, the some critics have referred to Repulsion, the Polanski movie Repulsion, which was the first one in the so-called Apartment trilogy. Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant all take place mostly in apartments. Now, this movie, I actually worked in a movie theater in 1976 when this was being shown, and there was quite a few people that just walked out because,
Wow.
I mean, it's a really, really strange, a really, really strange movie,
Yeah.
and did not do particularly well at the box office.
Hmm.
But because Polanski had such a hit with Chinatown right before this,
Uh-huh.
he was able to get this done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I'm going to move on to your Stephen King movie selection here.
Yeah, it's funny you call it a Stephen King movie because he hated the movie.
Yes, he did. So here's what I remember. Now, of course, there's so much with this one, just that I recall. I have seen a few times. You again have this, just this horrid mansion that, or the breakdown of these characters. Here's what I recall. What I recall was, yeah, Stephen King did not like, what's his name?
Jack Nicholson,
No, the director,
Stanley Kubrick.
Kubrick. He didn't like Kubrick's interpretation of this because
Yeah.
I remember in the late '90s, I think it was late '90s, they re-filmed this as I want to say it was a made for movie.
Yeah, it was a TV movie. I think it might have been in more than one part. What Stephen King didn't like about Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining was that Jack Torrance starts out in this movie kind of crazy and gets really crazy. And Stephen King liked the idea that this was a guy who started out perfectly normal,
Uh-huh.
and becomes crazy. Well, you can do that in a novel over the course of 300, 400 pages, but in a movie with a limited running time, even of 2 hours or whatever it was, you need to move things along pretty quickly. And uh, Jack Nicholson comes off a little nutty, so he had to start off as somebody who was barely under control.
And then it just took that little push to then unravel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just the red rum.
Now I saw this movie the day it opened up,
Wow.
and a week later, Kubrick had cut a scene from the end of the movie,
What?
which I saw the first day, but a week later it was gone. And that the Danny is in the hospital with Wendy, and the female psychologist is visiting with them, and just kind of reassuring everybody that everything's okay. And Kubrick decided, nah, I don't think I like that. I don't think I need that, and it kind of undercuts everything that's happened before. So he cut it out, and it's
Wow.
gone. No one's seen it since.
Wow. That's wild. And then now I'm gonna put this in because I love another filmmaker. I love David Lynch, and this one, Eraserhead, it's bizarre. It's out there, and of course I love out there movies.
It's one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite movies. In fact, when he was making The Shining, he insisted that everybody involved in the production of The Shining watch this movie.
What? Wow. And if I recall, again, I see what happens is as a filmmaker, I would go and I'd watch the Alfred Hitchcock. I've probably seen at least half of all his films, and I'm going through these entire libraries, And back when DVDs were, in the late 2000s, when I was really into making films and short films, but going through all of the Hitchcock, the David Lynch's, the Polanski films, and of course this was before I had as much information on the internet as there is today. If I recall, this image kind of brings it out. A lot of this psychological fears and anxieties about becoming a parent, right?
Yeah, if you had to analyze it, which it's kind of hard to analyze this movie, that certainly would be a theme. And that creature, I think he used the maybe it was the fetus of a lamb or something like that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, let's take a look. Eraserhead. Let's see if fetus comes right up.
Wow. Okay, that's even more freaky.
Yeah, what he used was, popular speculation suggests it was made from the remains of a calf or lamb fetus, while other theories range from a puppet of paper mache or rubber to more outlandish ideas. The mystery surrounding the prop was intentional and contributes to the film's unsettling atmosphere. So I guess it's not known. Yeah.
Wow. No.
The inhuman offspring of Mary X and Henry Spencer. The baby is an object of disgust for both Mary and Henry.
Yeah. I'm going to transition. We're going to transition as we're transitioning through film. This will be our last. I'm going to just put our director here is Hitchcock, and this will just be as we're wrapping up, and then we'll end with a few TV favorite horror shows. But Hitchcock. I mean, if you study film, Hitchcock is the perfect director. He tells a story with the utmost precision, showing the story.
Yeah,
And
something. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Yeah, something that is well known about him is that he meticulously storyboarded every frame of the movie or the key frames. So the entire movie
Mm,
was storyboarded in what looks like a comic book if you look at if you go and see the storyboards.
hmm.
So the part he hated most about making a movie was shooting it.
You know, it's interesting. That reminds me, and I'm blanking on the movie, but there was because this is exactly there was a car with windows. People will see if it comes up. He had this idea of he wanted it to look like the car or van was a face, and I don't remember which movie it was, but it's just interesting that you say I wasn't aware that he did so much heavy storyboarding,
Yeah, every
but it makes sense. And again, I think this is probably the most applicable thing for between movies and comics is that they're visual media, and it makes sense that he would meticulously storyboard because again he's showing everything through the visual field. And I mean, he was a master at this, and he was a master of building tension.
Yeah, absolutely. I came rather late to appreciating his movies. I think I'm trying to think of the first movie of his that I saw was probably The Birds,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went back and saw many of the other movies. But there's kind of no mistaking his touch.
Yeah.
And one thing I really like that I read about the birds recently, and this is something that is I really appreciate because when I write a comic book story, if I have control over the material, if I'm creating the material, I like the idea that the events are take place in isolation, so that no matter and with a limited number of characters, so
Mm-hmm.
that the only people that knew what happened in this story were the people directly involved. In comics, there's an awful lot of stories that take place on a grand scale that either the whole world is involved or a whole city or a whole universe. I just like the idea of isolation and control so that when the story's over, the only people who knew what happened are the few people who survived the story. And that's why he set the birds in such an isolated setting so that this could all happen and be done and not affect the world at large.
Wow. Yeah.
And because he realized if he did it any on a bigger scale, it becomes an epic science fiction movie that makes no sense
Uh-huh.
because the army would just use flamethrowers and completely wipe out the birds in 2 seconds. So,
Right. I love that, and again, I like that because, and especially if you're going to be doing something with a short story. I mean, a short story, especially if we're talking about anthology horror comic books. Every panel, every word matters, and like you said, it's very, it's one little thing could disrupt the whole story, or like you just said. So I hadn't thought about that, but I'm just to finish up on Mr. Hitchcock. I love this one. Have you ever watched Rope?
I have and looked very carefully for the one cut.
Well, no. So there's more than one cut, but that's my exact point. So this film was basically filmed completely in sequence, which most movies are made out of sequence, and basically and if I again, I haven't read this since about 2000, but back then, filming on a film roll, I believe a film roll would get you about 10 minutes.
Yes.
So I think what he would do is each scene is approximately 10 minutes long, and like you said, so that there's really, it was just filmed in order and completely as is. So just fascinating.
Yeah, all the editing was in the camera.
In the camera,
and so these people really had to know their lines.
so that's another good horror one. And then so that it transitions to Alfred Hitchcock did have Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Alfred Hitchcock Hour. I don't know. Do you know if there's a reason why they changed the title but was continued in the?
Yeah, very simple. Because it went from a half an hour to an hour.
All right. Speaking of which, we're going to end with The Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, my favorites, really my favorites. Now, here's my question. I think you're either the Outer Limit, you either have a favorite of The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone. I'm going to pick The Twilight Zone. Do you have a favorite if you had to pick one series?
Yeah, it would definitely be The Outer Limits.
So you're saying Outer Limits, yeah. I'm saying Twilight Zone. Now, interestingly, The Outer Limits were an hour long and Twilight Zone was 30 minutes. Do I have that right?
I'm not sure.
I think so. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Now, so for me, I kind of liked how they, because some of the Outer Limits I thought were a little more drawn out. I don't know. Why was that one your favorite?
Because of the science fiction element, and also I found it scarier. I do remember I saw these on TV when I was, 7, 8 years old, and this show gave me nightmares.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And when a show like this is an hour long, it can definitely have a little bit of padding. I remember I started paying attention to Star Trek a little bit late in the game as well.
Yeah.
And I did notice that certain episodes seemed to me a little stretched out to make the hour.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course I know there are certain Outer Limits that I can, I remember the stories. But I definitely remember more the stories of Twilight Zone. The one I think about with our man Vincent Price in The Last Man on Earth, I believe. So I remember that one. I thought that was.
That's.
I thought it was Vincent Price.
No, not.
You know what? That might have been a movie. Now I'm blanking.
Yeah, that's a movie.
That was a movie, okay. Yeah, but they also had an episode of that.
Yeah, and that is he's right there, and I can't think of his name. Burgess Meredith.
That's Rocky's trainer.
Yes, and also the Penguin on the old Batman.
The Penguin, yeah. And yeah, very cool. Well, I'll say the one thing we don't have is a lack of good inspiration and good entertainment. I'll just end with, like I said, I really, because I was making amateur films in the late 90s, and I wanted to write, I wanted to go from short films, I wanted to be a writer-director and make a movie, a feature-length film. And how do you do that as an amateur with zero budget, with a really shaky hand or, limited gear, limited actors? You make a B horror film.
Of course.
You get some Karo syrup and red food coloring to make your blood. So I'll just say, I wrote The Scarecrow, my version of a Scarecrow horror film. I was in med school. I was buying these. I remember going to like a flea market, buying a shovel and leaving it outside in the rain and elements to make it age a little bit. And I wrote the script a little bit. never filmed it, but and I tried to the main character would be, of course, me playing the protagonist, and had became severe anxiety and agoraphobic, wouldn't leave the house, and but yeah, I was gonna make a B horror film.
Well, that's the way you got to start. You will notice a lot of these pics are kind of old school, but I'm not big into gore, and if you're gonna look at stuff that's later or even much later than my picks, you're going to be looking at some pretty gory stuff. There are some examples. Dawn of the Dead, the second one, the first sequel. I forget, it's funny, but it's also kind of gory. But for the most part, not a big fan of or really explicit gore.
Yeah, but I just read this week, and I was actually thinking about this for this call, but it was in an email. I deleted it, but it was actually a quote by Stephen King. I'm going to get it completely wrong, but something to the effect of, for horror, basically gore would be the last thing he would go to. If you have to just get that shock and go for the gore, but otherwise he was very psychological in most of his writing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the scariest movies ever made is the first Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the one from the 50s, which is, I used to force my sister to watch that, and it would scare the hell out of her. And there's no gore in that. It's all psychological.
Okay, got it. And okay, I'm gonna just end with this one because I'm gonna tie it back to the very beginning. Bruce Jones loved his horror because he wrote. So I didn't even realize how much he wrote in Creepy. I did,
right.
and now I love Twisted Tales, and that was the inspiration for me for Little Pub of Horrors. PC Comics, mid '80s, indie glut, beautiful color and print quality, and with the price double the price cover price of any comic, any mainstream Marvel comic, because of that quality. I think it was 10 issues. They had Corbin and a lot of great artists.
Yeah, there was some great Corbin in there. Yeah,
great Corbin. But the reason I loved it, and I got into him because, and I met him at a comic convention, and he was writing the Hulk in the early 2000s, and he did this run, and yeah, he did that famous. There was that famous cover there. But what I liked about this was, if you read this story, the Return of the Monster, it was in this story arc. I remember it was talked about because he showed almost very little Hulk, if any, in this entire story, because he knew the imagination is scarier than what anything you could ever put on a page.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take a look at that run because I am not familiar with it.
Yeah, I believe it was the reboot of Incredible Hulk. Approximately, it was either issue 32 or 34, and goes for a good while. And even I believe the sequence, the follow-up Hulk film was loosely based on it. The one that had Edward Norton. Because there's Mr. Green and Mr. Blue or whatever, and they're typing cryptically, and he's on the run trying to tame the monster within. So awesome. Well, listen, hope you all enjoyed that. We definitely enjoyed it. We and just, it reminds me of, again, why I did Little Pub of Horrors, because I could go back to that writer with no limits. I don't have to worry about the camera or the gore or the actors. And, I'm just so pleased to be working with Miguel, this talented artist who, he makes the women beautiful and he makes the gore gory, and I get it all.
Yeah, thanks. It's Halloween, so it's a good time to do this. I've written a little bit of horror myself, and none of it too gory. But my inspiration has always been, the Warren stuff a little bit more than the EC stuff.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot.